It's Goldman Diaries. He told me to sell the bookstore the same week we buried my father. Said it was dead capital, his exact words. I was still unpacking boxes of my dad's things, still waking up thinking he was upstairs. But James didn't flinch. He just looked at me across the breakfast table and said, "Think about it." I didn't know then that he had already made up his mind. It had been 3 weeks since the funeral. 3 weeks since I stood in the rain, holding Olivia's hand, trying not to collapse. Every morning since, I walked down the stairs into the bookstore, and every morning the same hollow tightness in my chest, as if something had been pulled out of me and left open. The shop still smelled like him. Old paper, leather bindings, polished wood, dust warmed by the light. The door creaked exactly how it always did. He used to say it was the store's way of greeting him. Even the handle, he'd fixed it with his own hands after it snapped during a winter storm. Some things are worth keeping alive, he said back then. Now it was just me. And James. The bookstore was on the corner of a quiet street, ground floor. Above it, our apartment, tucked under the attic roof. We lived directly above the past. The stairs creaked the same way they did when I was a child. Back then, I ran down them to my father. Now I drifted. Slowly. Carefully. Like something might break if I moved too fast. The shop wasn't a business to me. It was breath. Memory. Safe space. I could sit there for hours rearranging shelves, sorting customer orders, heating tea behind the counter. Rain outside the windows, warm light inside, it felt like a pause from everything. James never understood. "This place is dead capital," he said that morning. I was buttering Olivia's toast. He didn't look up from his phone. "Sarah, you know stores like this are useless now. You could sell everything and invest in something new." He said it like he was offering help. Calm. Even gentle. But his tone, it slid under my skin. Polished words, but they pushed. He was always like that. Never raised his voice. But you felt it, when he didn't get his way. I didn't answer right away. Just kept moving. He looked up then, only briefly. "Waiting. I'm not ready," I finally said. "It's too soon." He exhaled like I'd confirmed something he already suspected. "Sooner is better," he muttered, and stood up. Kissed Olivia's head, grabbed his keys. "Think about it." And then he was gone. The silence he left behind was sharp. I finished my coffee in a daze, washed the mug, wiped the counter twice, just to feel my hands do something. Then I unlocked the shop door. The moment I stepped in, the weight in my chest shifted. I flicked on the lights. The soft buzz. The glow on the old wood. I walked between the shelves slowly, letting my fingers brush the bindings. They belonged to my father. Some of them were older than me. They still stood, solid, quiet, waiting. But something inside me had changed. James's voice echoed in my mind. Dead capital. As if these shelves were corpses. As if memory could be sold off. I stopped in front of the glass case where we kept the rare editions. My reflection stared back at me, blurred by fingerprints I hadn't cleaned yet. And for the first time, I felt it. A flicker of unease. Not grief. Not loss. Something else. Something I couldn't name yet. But it was there. And it was growing. I was rearranging the new arrivals in the display window. The glass was cold from the rain outside, and the spines of the books gleamed softly under the warm shop lights. I'd been doing this for years, choosing what to show, what to hide. But that morning, my hands were slower than usual. I kept pausing, staring out at the wet street like something out there might explain the heaviness inside me. Then Olivia came in. She didn't bounce in like she used to. She walked quietly, sat down on the wooden stool next to the register, and just watched me for a moment. "Mom," she said softly, "I need to tell you something, but it might sound weird." I turned to her. Her voice had that careful tone, the one she used when she wasn't sure if she'd get in trouble. "Last night," she said, "I couldn't sleep. I got up to get water. And I heard Dad. He was on the phone, talking to someone. I stopped moving. Olivia looked down at her hands. He said he had to find a letter. Before you did." The words didn't register at first. "What letter?" I asked. But she shook her head. He didn't say. Just that it was probably somewhere in the shop. In one of the books. Or maybe in Grandpa's desk. I felt a tight pull in my chest. My father's desk. We hadn't even opened it since the funeral. Olivia went on. When I came down a few steps, he suddenly stopped talking. He just went silent. And then I think he saw me. But he didn't say anything. He just stared for a second and hung up. She looked at me, eyes wide. I didn't mean to spy. I swear. I just thought, you should know. I sat down slowly behind the register. My hands were cold now, even though the room was warm. A letter, hidden somewhere in the shop. Something James didn't want me to find. My first thought was to tell Olivia it was probably nothing. That maybe she misunderstood. That sometimes people say things late at night that don't mean much. But I didn't. Because deep down, I believed her. Not just because of what she said, but because of the way James had looked at me lately. Like he was waiting for something. Like he was calculating. I reached out and took Olivia's hand. "Thank you for telling me," I said. She nodded and squeezed my fingers. And as she sat there beside me, quiet and still, I realized something that sent a slow chill down my spine. If James was looking for something in this shop, then he believed it was still here. And whatever it was, he didn't want me to see it first. It was the sound that woke me. Not loud, soft, muffled. Like a book falling. But not in the usual way. Heavier. Deliberate. I opened my eyes into the dark. The house felt still, but not empty. James wasn't in bed. I sat up slowly, my feet touching the cold floor. The hallway beyond the bedroom was completely dark. I listened. Nothing. But I knew I hadn't imagined the sound. Barefoot, I stepped out and began moving down the stairs, careful not to let them creak. I held my breath. A faint glow spilled from below, the desk lamp at the counter. Through the half-open door to the shop, I saw him. James. He was bent over the drawer of rare books. The one we almost never opened. His back was to me. He moved fast, sharp, like time was running out. Several volumes lay scattered around him, precious, expensive books thrown aside like trash. His hands dug deeper, flipping through bindings with no care. On the counter, the wooden box we kept for client letters. It was open. Empty. His posture was tense, his movements frantic. He wasn't browsing. He was searching. For what? I didn't move. Didn't breathe. I watched long enough to understand. He wasn't curious. He wasn't lost. He knew exactly what he was looking for. And it wasn't his first time. I turned and walked back upstairs, each step a controlled tremor. I slipped into bed, pulled the blanket over me, closed my eyes. 10 minutes later, I heard the soft creak of the stairs. The pause in the hallway. The door opening gently. James slid into bed beside me. As if nothing had happened. He didn't speak. Just settled in, turned his back, and exhaled. My heart didn't slow down for a long time. In the morning, the light through the kitchen window felt too bright. Too clean. I went downstairs before anyone else. Into the shop. It was spotless. The drawer was closed. The books back in place. The box full of old letters again, neatly arranged, like no one had ever touched it. I walked between the shelves, trying to match the room to the image from last night. But there was no evidence. No trace. If I hadn't seen it myself, I would have doubted it happened at all. But I had seen it. At breakfast, he was already at the table. Toasting bread, humming quietly to himself. Coffee was brewing. He glanced at me and smiled like everything was just fine. "Neighbor across the street's in Bali again," he said, pouring me a cup. "Says it's too humid this time of year." I sat across from him. "You didn't sleep last night?" I asked, watching his face. He didn't flinch. "Why do you think that?" I sipped the coffee. "I thought I heard you get up." He shrugged, casual. "Probably went to get some water." "Everything's fine, sweetheart." I nodded slowly, but my stomach turned. He was lying. So easily. Like he'd done it before. Like he'd practiced. And suddenly I understood. This wasn't the beginning. It was already happening. I was sorting through the last box of my father's personal files. The papers still smelled faintly of his cologne, old cedar, and ink. Most of it was just correspondence with collectors, publishers, handwritten notes in his small, sharp handwriting. I moved on autopilot, organizing, labeling, trying to feel useful, trying not to think about James. Or the night before. One folder stood out. A manila envelope marked in red pen, Meyer/private. I froze. Victor Meyer. That name was familiar, my father's old friend. A former publisher. I hadn't heard it in years. Last I knew, he was living in Seattle. They used to write to each other often, sometimes joking about rare books no one cared about anymore. I hesitated. I almost tossed the folder into the archive box without looking, but something in me said wait. I opened it. Dozens of letters inside. Most were just exchanges, stories, fragments, dates, little bookish memories. I flipped through them absently until I saw one that stopped my breath. It was dated a month before my father died. Written in his hand. Never sent. I read the first lines, and my throat tightened. Victor, if something happens to me, look at the Ulysses, first edition. You'll understand what I mean. That was all. I sat completely still, the letter trembling in my fingers. The Ulysses. It was in the glass display case, second shelf from the bottom. A pristine first edition. My father always said it was his most prized possession, not because of value, but because of what it had survived. I moved without thinking. Crossed the room, opened the glass case. My hands were already shaking. The book felt heavier than I remembered. I turned the pages carefully, then stopped. Between pages, something was folded. A thick sheet of paper, yellowed at the edges. I pulled it out, unfolded it. It was a letter, a long one, handwritten. My father's pen strokes quick, but strong. The ink slightly smudged, like he'd written it all at once. I didn't even get to read the first sentence, because just then, the door to the shop slammed shut. I flinched. The sound echoed like a gunshot through the quiet. Someone was here. I froze, still clutching the letter. My breath caught. My fingers clenched the paper too tightly. I turned my head toward the sound. Footsteps. 1, 2. Silence. The front door was locked. I was sure I hadn't unlocked it. My heart pounded in my ears. I didn't move. The letter was still in my hands. And now someone else was in the shop. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and warm milk. I'd made tea, but barely touched it. Outside, the street was drowning in rain, steady, endless, tapping on the glass like fingers that wouldn't stop. It was already dark, but I hadn't turned the lights on yet. Just the yellow glow from the stove light. Dim, quiet. Everything too quiet. I sat at the table, trying to make myself focus. I kept thinking about the letter I hadn't read. The one I'd pulled from Ulysses. The one still hidden, stuffed under a stack of papers in the drawer by the counter. I'd frozen when the door slammed. Didn't even look up. Just tucked the letter away and waited for the steps to leave. They did. But I never got back to the words my father wrote. I was afraid. Not of the letter, of what it might confirm. James was in the garage. He'd said something about a spark plug, but I didn't ask. I didn't want to see him. Didn't want to hear his voice. Every glance, every word from him now felt like a performance. I heard soft footsteps behind me. Olivia entered the kitchen, wrapped in her blanket, and sat beside me without saying a word. We sat in silence for a moment, listening to the rain. Then she whispered. I heard him again. I turned to her slowly. She kept her eyes on the mug in her hands. He's on the phone. In the garage. Same voice as last time. Low, like you didn't want anyone to hear. I waited. She swallowed. He said, when it happens, it'll all be ours. Her voice barely above a breath. Then he said, finally, this place will start making money. My skin prickled. He said it like it was already decided. Like everything had been planned. Like it was just a matter of time. What did you do then? I asked quietly. I came to find you. I pulled her close, kissed her forehead. She looked up at me. What's going to happen, Mom? I didn't know what to say. So I lied. Nothing, sweetheart. Everything's okay. She didn't look convinced. But she nodded and stood. I'm gonna go to bed. I waited until I heard her door close. Then I moved. I slipped on soft slippers, threw on a cardigan, took the small flashlight from the drawer by the stove, and walked to the shop. Not fast. Not slow. Just steady. I didn't turn on the lights. Only the beam from the flashlight moved ahead of me as I stepped between the shelves. The rain outside had softened to a whisper. Everything felt too still, like the shop was holding its breath. Somewhere inside, that letter waited. But I felt it now, deep in my chest. I wasn't just searching for words. I was walking into something real. The shop was completely still, like it was holding its breath. I moved slowly, flashlight pointed at the floor. No creaking, no sound. Just that same thick, musty air soaked in paper, ink, and something else now, something darker. And then I saw it. Near the storage room, Against the wall, a backpack. Large. Heavy-looking. I stopped in my tracks. It hadn't been there before. I crouched down and carefully unzipped it. My fingers felt stiff. Every part of me wanted to stop, but I couldn't. On top, a black hoodie, folded with precision. Under it, a pair of rubber gloves, a glasses case, and a box of matches. I paused. I dug a little deeper. There it was, a sealed plastic container, thick and dense. Even before I registered the smell, I knew. Gasoline. No question. I backed away slightly, knees still bent, heart hammering. And then his voice came back to me. When it happens, it'll all be ours. Finally, this place will start making money. The words hit differently now, like they'd been waiting to surface. I stared at the backpack. What was this? Was he planning something? A fire? The thought felt too big, too ridiculous. But the bag was real. The contents, deliberate. Who packs gasoline with gloves and matches? But then again, maybe it wasn't what I thought. Maybe I was overreacting. James had tools. Supplies. He worked in the garage a lot lately. Maybe he used gas for something. Maybe he just forgot it here. But then why the gloves? Why hide it? I zipped the backpack shut, hands slightly shaking. I left it exactly where I'd found it, like it would explode if I moved it. Back upstairs, I passed through the hallway like I didn't belong in my own house. The lights were off. James was still in the garage. I could hear the low clinks of metal, like nothing was wrong. I sat on the edge of the bed, eyes unfocused, sweater still wrapped tight around me. What if I was wrong? What if this was all in my head? But what if I wasn't? The store. The pressure to sell. The strange tone in his voice lately. The late-night calls. The hidden backpack. And still, it didn't make sense. He wanted to sell the place, not burn it. Burning it, wouldn't that ruin everything? Unless he had another plan. A way to make it worth more. A way that didn't include me. I didn't want to go further with that thought. Instead, I stood, quietly, took the flashlight from the drawer. My fingers hesitated and then moved on their own. If I couldn't sleep, I might as well do what I'd been avoiding. The letter. The one from my father. I hadn't dared read it before. But now, with the air full of doubt and smoke that hadn't happened yet, I needed answers. And maybe, just maybe, he'd seen something I hadn't. The house was quiet, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the silence wasn't real. I stood in the hallway, just outside Olivia's door, listening. Then I gently pushed it open. She was awake, lying on her side, staring at the wall. When she turned to me, her eyes weren't sleepy. They were alert. I stepped inside and whispered, "I need your help." She sat up immediately, no questions asked. I handed her the flashlight. "We're going down to the shop." Quietly. We moved like shadows through the house, avoiding the creaky spots on the stairs. My hands were still cold from before. I felt every heartbeat in my fingers. In the store, I went straight to the drawer near the counter. The letter was still there, hidden beneath the stack of random receipts and customer notes. I pulled it out slowly. The paper was thick, folded clean. My father's handwriting covered the front. I unfolded it with both hands and began to read. "Dear." I accidentally saw an email from James to the insurance company. He was inquiring about how to take out a life insurance policy in your name. According to the emails, in the event of your death, he would be the sole beneficiary of the payout. That alarmed me. I don't want to jump to conclusions, but please be careful. Take care of yourself. Dad. I stared at the letter for a long moment. The words burned through my chest. Not because I was shocked, but because I already knew. This wasn't a suspicion anymore. It was real. James had been planning something long before my father died. Maybe even while he was still alive. And my father, the only one who'd seen through it, hadn't told me directly. He was trying to protect me without alarming me. But now, it was all clear. The rucksack. The gasoline. The lie about the water at night. And now this. Insurance money. In the event of my death. He wasn't just trying to burn the store. He was trying to erase me from the equation. I felt Olivia step closer. She looked up at me, sensing something had shifted. "Take a picture of this," I said quietly, handing her the letter. "Just in case." She pulled out her phone and took a photo with steady hands. We stood there in the dark shop, just the two of us, surrounded by books and silence and the ghost of my father's warning. I folded the letter again. slipped it back between two books on the shelf behind the register. Olivia didn't speak. She didn't have to, because now we both knew. This wasn't just about a bookstore. It was about survival. The moment I heard the faint crunch of gravel outside the shop window, I froze. Olivia must have sensed it too. We both turned at once. Through the pane, dimly lit by the street lamp, we saw him. James. His silhouette was unmistakable. He was standing just outside, staring in through the glass. I didn't have time to think. I grabbed the letter from Olivia's hands and shoved it deep between two books on the shelf behind the register. I didn't even register which titles. I just knew I had to hide it. The front door creaked open. James stepped inside. He didn't speak right away. His eyes adjusted to the dimness, then landed on us, first Olivia, then me. I didn't find you in bed, he said casually, closing the door behind him. Figured you might have come down here. His voice was soft, maybe even friendly, but I felt my body go rigid. There was something too smooth about the way he said it, like he'd rehearsed the line. Then he added, "Didn't expect to find both of you." His eyes lingered on Olivia for half a second too long before returning to mine. I forced myself to smile, to breathe. "I thought I heard footsteps," I said lightly. "We just wanted to check the shop." James raised an eyebrow. "Footsteps? At this hour?" I shrugged. "It's an old building. Could have been anything. Pipes. The wind." "I see," he said quietly. No follow-up. No emotion. Just that flat, unreadable tone. We stood in silence for a moment. Then he smiled. "Come on. Let's go back upstairs. It's late." His shift in tone was almost jarring, too fast, too easy. Like a curtain dropped. We followed him. I didn't look back at the shelf. Didn't dare. Each step up the stairs felt louder than usual. Olivia stayed close to me. I felt her fingers graze mine for a moment, then pull away. Once upstairs, she went straight to her room without a word. Her door clicked shut softly. James and I walked into the kitchen. He moved toward the counter, filled the kettle, like this was just any other night. But then he stopped and turned to face me. And I saw it, the shift. Not in his face, but in his eyes. He was studying me. "Were you looking for something downstairs?" he asked. The words were calm. Innocent, almost. But I knew better. There was something behind them. A sharpness. A test. I held his gaze, willing my face not to betray anything. Not fear. Not anger. Not knowledge. I smiled. "No," I said softly. "Just checking the locks." He didn't answer right away. Just kept watching me. I smiled, just enough. "I had a dream about my dad," I said quietly. "I couldn't sleep." James studied me for a second, then nodded. "You've been having a lot of those lately." I shrugged. "Everything down there reminds me of him. The books. The chair. Even the creak in the floorboards." He didn't press. He just poured himself a glass of water, said goodnight, and went to brush his teeth like nothing had happened. I stood there a little longer in the kitchen, staring at the tiles on the wall, trying to calm my hands. Then I went to bed. In the morning, after James left, I picked up the phone and called Claire. She lived 3 blocks away. We'd known each other since college. I trusted her. More than anyone else now. When she answered, I didn't waste time. "I need to tell you something," I said. "And I need you to really listen." Her voice shifted. "Okay. What's going on?" I told her about the letter from my father. The insurance policy James might have taken out. I told her about the backpack, the gloves, the gasoline, the matches. I didn't embellish. I didn't speculate. I just gave her the facts. And then I said, "I think something bad is going to happen. And I think it's going to happen soon." She was silent for a moment. I heard her breath catch. "Do you want me to call the police?" she asked. "No," I said quickly. "Not yet. I don't have enough. And if I'm wrong?" "But what if you're not?" She didn't argue. I exhaled. "Just stay close. Please. Keep your phone on tonight. If you hear anything, see anything, just be ready." "I will," she said softly. "I'm here." I thanked her and hung up. Then I stood there in the hallway, phone still in my hand, and tried to breathe. Because now, I wasn't just afraid for myself. Now I was preparing for it. That evening, the shop was quiet. I was just about to lock up. The lights were dimmed, the kettle washed, the rain finally stopped. And then I heard it. The sound of a key turning from the outside. I froze. My hand flew to the handle. I pulled, twisted, yanked, locked. From the outside. Hello? I called out. Silence. I knocked hard. Is someone there? And then, I felt it. A shift in the air. The cold draft turned warm. Then hot. Then, smoke. My eyes widened. A soft click echoed from the storage room. Then a faint, dry crackling, followed by the unmistakable smell of burning wood. No. I ran toward the back, the panic already rising. I reached the back door, grabbed the handle, pulled. Bolted. From the outside. No. I pounded on it. Nothing. Smoke was sliding across the floor now, curling around the shelves. My throat tightened. My eyes burned. I pulled my sweater over my mouth and dropped low to the floor. The fire was spreading. The walls were hissing. The books crackled like dead leaves. I couldn't think. I couldn't scream. My body moved on instinct. And then I remembered the old window under the stairs. Small. Rusted. But it led into the courtyard. I crawled toward it, coughing, eyes watering. Flames chased me. I felt the heat on my back, the sting in my skin. I reached the window. Tried the latch. Stuck. I shoved it with both hands. Once. Twice. The frame groaned. Metal scraped. The hinges screamed and gave way. I squeezed through, barely fitting, my legs scraping against the edge, smoke pouring out behind me. And then I was outside. Cold air hit me like a slap. I stumbled into the courtyard, gasping. And then, I saw her. Mom. Olivia ran to me, tears already on her face. She threw her arms around me. I smelled smoke, she cried. I ran out. I called them. I called the police. Blue lights. Sirens. Fire trucks. It all blurred together. 5 minutes later, James appeared. He ran toward us, looking shaken and afraid. That's when the police stepped in. They came straight to him, without hesitation, placed handcuffs on his wrists, and read him his rights. James Henley, you are under arrest for arson and attempted murder. He turned to me, stunned, completely unprepared. I looked him in the eye. I found my father's letter, I said. I knew everything, James. They took him away. He didn't fight, didn't shout. He just kept staring at me, like he still couldn't believe the performance was over. I testified. So did Olivia. The letter from my father, that one folded page, became the center of everything. It was enough. The fire destroyed almost half the store. But the archive survived. The old books. The things that mattered. 6 months later, I reopened. I gave it a new name, Legacy. Because what was left wasn't just a bookstore, it was proof that my father's voice still echoed here. And always would. In the front window, behind clean glass, sat the first edition of Ulysses, its edge singed by fire. What would you do if you were in Sarah's place? Go straight to the police after finding the letter and the gas can? Or confront James and call him out on the spot? Join the discussion in the comments below. Subscribe, more untold stories are on the way.